evening. Tonight is Wednesday, January 12th, and this is the Hudson School Board of Education meeting. Can I have a motion to open the meeting, please? Corey, we can't hear you, but I saw your lips move. Corey moved, okay. And Allie seconded. Can I get, oh, excuse me, I have to read my statement first. So at this point, we'll be moving into our executive session. The Hudson School District Board of Education will convene executive session for the purpose of collective negotiations under the Taylor Law, medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment or promotion or demotion or discipline or suspension or removal of a particular person or corporation. Can I have a motion to move into exec, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
To the public, we'll be back at about 7 p.m. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Today is Wednesday, January 12th, and this is the Hudson School Board of Education meeting. The Board of Education has just left their executive session, and we are now back in public session. Can we start our public session with the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. All right, so for our first order of business, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as stated?
So moved.
Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Does anybody have anything to pull from the consent agenda this evening? All right, looks like no pulling from the consent agenda this evening. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Can I get a second? Thank you, Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. So that brings us to our items that were removed from the consent agenda. This evening, we have 4 donations. Our first donation is a $400 donation to the Diane Tangen Scholarship Fund. The Hudson High School is the recipient of the following donation for specific graduation awards, which is the Diane Tangen Scholarship Fund. Thank you very much for that donation. Our second donation is a donation from the Hudson Community Education Foundation, and they have made a donation of $352 for the purchase of Chromebook cases, styluses, and insurance. It will cover the insurance for 11 students who either qualify for free or reduced lunch or have been identified by their principal as having this need. Thank you to the HHCEF. They are wonderful partners in our community, and that's greatly appreciated. Our third donation is a donation for $500 from Project Lead the Way from the New York Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital Center. So that's wonderful. They made the following donation for the Project Lead the Way Biomedical Science program, which is a wonderful college level high school program that we have here. Thank you very much to the New York Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital Center. And last, but certainly not least, is the donation of a trombone by Ms. Deborah Borchardt. Our music department is always happy to welcome new instruments into their family. So thank you very much to Ms. Borchardt for this donation. Can I get a motion to approve those 4 donations, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, so that concludes our consent agenda. Our next item on the agenda is our presentations and discussion, and we'll be starting off with our Putnam Northern Westchester Boces Student of Distinction. And this evening, that student is Emily Hunt. I'm very excited to find out about Emily and her award.
I know Greg is going to call up a video that Boces had sent us to recognize Emily and her achievement. I'll let everyone know that typically in a non-COVID environment, representatives from Putnam Northern Westchester Boces, including sometimes their superintendent, assistant superintendent, other administrators and teachers, and certainly the recipient and their family would come to a board meeting and would have accolades thrown all upon them in terms of why the student was chosen and some of the great things that they're up to. And it also allows Putnam, Northern Westchester, Boces to highlight some of their outstanding programs. Because of where we are in the pandemic, Boces is doing this not virtually, but they've produced a video that they want to make sure that we see as a school board, but also that our community has access to. So Greg is going to call that up, and we hope that you enjoy the celebration of one of our great students who's doing outstanding things at our local Boces.
Good evening. It is with great pleasure that I join you to announce this month's recipient of the Putnam Northern Westchester Boces Student of Distinction Award. This significant achievement is for students recognized by our staff for outstanding performance and personal growth. I also want to take a moment to thank you for your continued support. We value our relationship with your school district and look forward to continuing to serve your needs. And now for the Student of Distinction Award.
Hello. I'm delighted to congratulate Emily Hunt as a January Student of Distinction Award winner. Emily is a sophomore from Hudson School District who has shown great promise here at Fox Meadow, and we're happy that she's here. We're all very proud of Emily Hunt and her accomplishments while attending Fox Meadow High School. Her teachers report that Emily has a great attitude. Her work habits and demeanor are a great example of our PBIS behavior matrix of students being responsible, respectful, and ready. We are proud of the success Emily has had here at Fox Meadow and look forward to watching her continued success. I would like to congratulate Emily Hunt for her recognition for Student of Distinction Award. Congratulations, Emily.
Thank you so much. That's such a lovely video. I hope everybody can see us all on the squares. Everybody is applauding. Emily, congratulations on your award. I'm sure you're doing great work. I wish we could see you in person, but we're very excited for you. I hope the rest of your school year goes very well, and I hope this current spike ends quickly so things can get back to more normalness in short order. Joe, did you have anything else to say before we move on?
Yeah, we've asked Boces for permission to publish that video on our website and social media so that other folks, not just those that are on this meeting virtually or watching at home, have access to it. We're really proud of Boces or of Emily, and certainly proud that we can partner with Boces that provides outstanding programs and services to our students. And I don't know if you saw, but Emily was wearing one of her field hockey jackets. She also participates on our field hockey team, and it's just it's outstanding that we have so many students that utilize all of the fantastic services and programs at Boces and are able to completely or have a complete educational experience at Boces, and also participate in any and all of our extra clubs and activities and athletics. And we're very proud of Emily, and we're glad that she was recognized.
Thank you. So our next presentation is our strategic plan update. The steering team is very excited to present this update to the Board of Education. We have community members that are on the strategic plan steering committee, as well as some of our facilitators from Education Elements. We're just going to give you an update as to what has been going on with the strategic plan up to this point. I am going to ask that all of the trustees hold their questions until the end of the presentation so that it flows a little bit more smoothly and we're not interrupting the presenters. And I'll be calling on you in alphabetical order to ask if you have any questions. After the strategic plan update, we'll take a 5-minute stretch your leg break before we go on to our next presentation, which is going to be our facilities update. All right, so good evening.
So as Dr. Abraham mentioned, this is a really exciting time in our district. Our school district has a deep and rich history of strategic planning. And in fact, we were due to re-up our strategic plan back in 2016, in the fall of 2016. And something very consequential happened in our community as we turned the calendar to 2017, and that was the announcement that Entergy was closing Indian Point. We decided as an organization, school board at the time, to hit pause on our strategic plan because we had some other pressing matters that we had to make sure we took care of. But while we worked through many different changes in our school district, we also knew that we had to move forward and create a vision for what the future of our school district looks like. And if I could describe strategic planning in a few words, is that it's an opportunity for a community to dream of what they want their schools to look like. And it's a process that includes many, many stakeholders, both folks that are in our organization, parents, community members that perhaps are not parents, business leaders. And so we're trying to engage as many people as possible to help them dream with us in terms of what the future of our school district looks like. So I'm going to turn it over to Dana Britt. Dana is one of our facilitators who is leading us through this really fun and exciting process. She'll introduce the team that's with her and will spearhead our presentation. So Dana, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dana Britt, and I work with the organization Education Elements. We're so proud to partner with your district to work on your strategic plan. I'm a former high school ELA teacher and district leader who's been for the past 6 years supporting districts across the country in their strategic plans. And I'll also pass the mic over to my colleague, Ronnie Bunjarian.
Good evening, everybody. Like Dana, I am really excited to be a part of this process, and I'm honored that I'm a part of this work with you all. I'm also part of Education Elements. In a former life, I was a high school math teacher, and in my time at Education Elements, I have been working on strategic planning and personalized learning with districts across the United States. I'm going to pass it on to two of our steering team committee members, and I'll pass it first to Millie to introduce herself.
Unmute. Hi, I'm Millie Mish. I'm a parent of a 6th and 5th grader and a volunteer on the steering committee team.
And we also have Chris.
Yeah.
And hi, I'm Christine Schuster. I am a parent of a preschooler and a 3rd grader on the steering committee, and I'm a strategic professional in the finance technology world.
If we could go 2 slides forward, we had a few other team members that we were hoping to be with us tonight. We have a few staff members, a few teachers on our committee, but due to health, this is the team that was able to join us this evening. We'll go to our objective slide. What are we hoping to dedicate this time with you today? We want to make sure to give you an update on our progress and make sure that you kind of know what is strategic planning, why are we doing it, what have we learned so far, what have we heard from the community, who's been involved, and where are we going from here? So you can see on the right, you'll hear mainly from the steering committee members about their experience, the things that they've experienced through the process, what they've heard through all of the stakeholder engagement that we've been doing over the past few months. Next slide. Or actually 2 slides now, and will be great. We want to share a little bit about what is strategic planning. Why would you want to engage in strategic planning? And as you see here, it's looking deeply at who we are as a district, what we aspire to do and how we aspire to do it, and then co-creating a path forward for the district that lives in both internal and external documents and systems. And a lot of times when you think of strategic planning, you think of that final end document that you might see. But what we believe is that really good strategic planning is a lot also behind the scenes in terms of the processes and the structures and the people, and making sure that you're engaging as much of the community to have voice and to provide a feedback loop as possible. And why would you invest all that time and energy and resources in doing strategic planning? We believe that it builds community-wide focus and alignment about why we do what we do and what matters to us at Hendra Hudson. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit more about why strategic planning, why now? It's a really healthy and normal activity that districts across the country are going through, particularly now, given the pandemic, thinking the need to refresh and to reset and to hear from our stakeholders. Stakeholders have been having an eye into the classroom through Zoom, just like we are right now, when the classes have been closed. So our stakeholders really want the opportunity to give their feedback and input on what instruction looks like and what we're preparing our students at Henhood to do after they leave us. And it provides that sense of direction. It helps us to grow as an organization. It gives us a pulse check, and it helps us to figure out where to focus our efforts so that we're all rowing in the same direction. Next slide, please. So it might be a little bit hard to see, but we'll share this document as well so that you can go back and take a look at it after this presentation. But you'll see here on the left that every district's final strategic plan looks a little bit different. What gets included in the final product, they all completely reflect the unique identities of the districts, but all strategic plans will have some format of mission, vision, values. So why we exist, where we want to go, what we believe. And then the big thing are the priorities. They might have around 3 to 5 priorities that we're going to focus on in the next 3 to 5 years. And those 4 areas are what you'll hear from the steering team members that we've been focusing on in the last several months. If you had an opportunity to participate in a one-on-one interview or to answer the survey or to do a focus group, the questions that we ask are trying to get at the heart of why we exist, where we want to go, what we believe, and what we should prioritize. And what the steering committee members are going to share tonight is a little bit of what we've heard about what the community hopes that we will prioritize, what the community believes about what we're preparing students to do, and what the community believes about our strengths and our areas for growth potentially. And then from there, as you'll hear, the next steps are really narrowing down from what we heard from the community to some of those key priorities. And within that, goals for each priority, key performance indicators for each of those, strategies within that, the final approach that we'll take. Those are all of the more detailed aspects that we're not yet at the process of. We're still at the open inquiry phase of trying to hear from the community, but the next step that we're going to be taking in late January, February will be to come to some of those pillars. And you'll hear a little bit from Ronnie about the different teams and how they're going to start working on the pillar areas in the next few months. Next slide. And this is just a little bit more about what I was sharing. We're in the foundations phase right now. If you think about laying a house or creating a house, you have to lay the foundation first. And so that's what we've been doing with figuring out a little bit about who we are, why we exist, where we might be headed, to hear from stakeholders about strengths and areas for growth. And then the next phase we're going to get into is that designing and launching phase, where we define a vision and set of initiatives that prioritizes what matters most to the community. Next. Here you can also see a little bit of the timeline of what we've been engaged in. We started this work in October, and we now are about halfway through. And so we're just getting to the part again where we'll be starting to design the new initiatives. But if you get a chance to go back and read this, this is the different touch points that we've been engaging each of our stakeholders in. Next, please. All right, I'll pass it over to Ronnie to share a little bit more about who's been involved so far and how you, if you haven't yet gotten involved, will be able to get involved in the future.
Thank you so much, Dana. On this slide, I want to point to the work that we do whenever we begin to support districts with developing a strategic plan, specifically a responsive plan. We recommend incorporating all of the different stakeholders into a feedback loop of sorts. And you'll see on the left, and we'll dive deeper into this in the next couple of slides, that it is kind of a multi-tiered teaming system. There are 4 teams, and teams, some teams have been working a little bit more in depth earlier on in the process, like Dana was saying, in the open inquiry and the foundations phase. And as we'll dive a little bit further on in the slides today, you'll see how some of the work of the other teams begins to kick into full gear later on in the process. On the next slide, I wanted to very briefly give you an overview of the 4 teams and the purpose of each of the 4 teams and kind of the main accountabilities of each of these 4 teams. You'll see the project team runs the logistical details and convenes the teams, ensures the project is running smoothly and following the timeline. And the steering team serves as the representative body who kicks off the project and steers it throughout. The main accountabilities of the steering team have mostly lived in this foundations phase, helping conduct the stakeholder engagement. And what we were able to do prior to the holiday season, we were able to all come together in person with a steering team and review trends from the stakeholder engagement, that survey, that community assessment, the one-on-one interviews or any focus groups that you may have been a part of, and begins to think about what are some possible focus areas or pillars. And that is where we are in the process right now. The planning and advisory team, you'll see the planning team really kicks into full gear after those focus areas have been narrowed down and zoomed into. They dive into the planning for one or more of these focus areas. They design solutions, make recommendations for initiatives and action steps within the focus areas. And really their goal and their accountabilities between now and when this process is over, hopefully in May, is coming up, like Dana was saying, with the language that articulates the key performance indicators and the goals between when the strategic plan is published and for the next 3 or 5 years. And finally, the advising team serves the process in a consultative capacity, reviewing documents and planning systems and giving feedback at key points, and really ensuring that the decision-making is equitable and representative of the community. On the next slide, we wanted to give you a chance. Like Dana mentioned, these slides are readily available to you, so feel free to return to them to see who all is involved in this process. But we articulate the names of the people that are involved in the project team and the steering team. And currently we have 62 community members who are serving in a dual capacity on the planning/advising team. And later on this month, and really in February, when we've narrowed down the focus areas of the strategic plan, we will determine the members of each of the pillars planning team and those who will serve as advisors. And that will be in large part governed by those 62 community members' time commitments and ability to commit time to this process, as well as their specific interest in specific pillars that the steering team has articulated. And then finally, on the final slide of the teaming structure, we wanted to give you a very general overview of the representation on the steering team. We were very happy at the beginning of this process when we sent out a steering team and a strategic planning interest form. We received 82 applications. You'll see that 20 of those applicants were chosen to be members of the steering team. 4 of those applicants are teachers, 2 elementary and 2 secondary. There are 5 district leaders, 7 family members across grade bands and schools, 3 administrators, and 1 community member who also happens to be a family member. And you'll see that we wanted to include everybody that expressed interest in this process. And so the remainder 62 of the folks that submitted an application to be a part of this process, all of those folks have been named to be part of the planning and advising team. And we have been in touch with them. We kicked off the process with them a few months ago. And like we mentioned in previous slides, once the pillars have been identified, that is when their work begins to kick into full gear. And I wanted to very briefly, I won't read through them, but that's there for your benefit. We included the language of the prompts and the interest form. And so when folks received the interest form, these were the questions that they responded to. And these were the questions that as a project team, we were able to read out of all of these 82 submissions and able to ascertain the different teaming structures. Thank you so much. I am going to pass it on to Christine Schuster, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the first phase of this work, stakeholder engagement, and some key trends that we were able to pull from the data. Christine, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Ronnie. So from a stakeholder engagement perspective, the goal was really to find out who we're working with across the whole community, and to collect that initial feedback. And we're not done yet. So what I want to highlight for anybody who is listening to this, we have 3 town halls coming up starting on Wednesday, next Wednesday, on the 19th, the 20th, and the 24th, where we will be able to walk through in much more detail than we're covering in the call today. We also have, on slide 28 of this presentation, we also have links to the data, the outcomes of the surveys, and well, I'll get into the different data points, but we have, to provide more transparency in the data as well. So those links are in the slides on slide 28, and we have those 3 town halls coming up as well. Tonight we'll just walk, at a bit of a higher level. So if you can go to the next slide, please. We have completed the first round of stakeholder engagement. This is incredible. We have input from well over 600 people. We held 18 focus groups, in person or virtual, with a small number of people. We had 58 one-on-one interviews, and we received 600 responses to the community survey, the community assessment. So if you look at the next slide, you'll see a little more detail about who responded to all of these requests for input. So the next slide outlines for the survey, those 600 respondents. Now, anybody could identify with more than one of these categories, but we had 100 current students respond. We had a good number of former students and alumni, parents and guardians of both current and former students. Those parents or guardians do make up the bulk of the, do make up over 50% of the respondees. We also had a solid representation from employees, both instructional and non-instructional, from the school and district leadership teams, and from people who identified as community members. When we conducted the focus groups, we divided these up into the categories that you can see here. I won't share all of them, but students from the different schools, teachers focused in a number of different areas, family members associated with the different schools. We did try to have people who did not have a direct affiliation with the schools, but not a big surprise. It was hard to get them to engage without that direct affiliation. So everybody has at least some connection, whether it's through employment, having been or currently being a student, having students in the schools. And then the one-on-one interviews, again, we received the bulk of the input from parents, so 34 current parents or guardians of students, and then also you can see the numbers for the other groups. And again, people could fall into more than one category. All right, so now we get to the exciting part, which is what we actually found. So, and again, for those of you who get as excited about the raw data or close to raw data, clean data as I do, we are providing links to more information as well. So the main findings were around communications and meeting the needs of a diverse community. Those were far and away the biggest trends, but we'll dive into some specific ones. So on this slide, and we have 4 slides that speak to the survey results. So this is the first of 4. And then 2 slides that talk about what came out of the interviews, and then I'll pass it over to Millie. So in terms of the key survey results, we had 45% who agreed that they are satisfied with the school district. What was interesting here is that about a quarter of people are actively dissatisfied. And when we look at the instructional teachers and alumni, the numbers are even higher there. District leadership none of the district leadership who responded stated dissatisfaction with the current school district. We also found that 39% believe that we make decisions in the best interest of students. Now, I will call out on these. So the blue bars are people who agree with the statement. Yellow bars and orange bars are people who disagree with it. That gray bar in the middle are people who and sometimes don't understand the question or do not. Usually what we find with surveys like these, they're people who do not agree with the statement. They don't necessarily strongly disagree, but they're, in general, oftentimes that's interpreted as a negative response, but I'll be interpreting them as just entirely neutral as I talk through that. Okay, so the next slide on the academics. Three main questions here. A good sizable number, 63%, believe that students are getting a high quality education. The highest level of agreement came from the leadership team. The lowest level came from alumni. And we do have some demographic information as well. We found that the highest level agreement to that question did come from the Hispanic and Black African American communities, and was lowest for other non-white races. And the breakdowns in terms of who responded, in more agreement and less agreement were similar for these other questions around the academic needs of the students and having high expectations. All right, so the next slide then is around equity and resource stewardship and access. This first question, and usually anything below a 50% agreement or anything that has more than 20% disagreement is an area that you really want to be paying attention to. So this one, this one around the commitment to equity, only 46% of respondents agreed to. And what was interesting was that it was especially low from alumni and instructional employees. So that's an area that we will be, certainly looking much more deeply into. Equitable access, however, did score a 56%. And so just interesting that having access is not the same thing as actually having equity, right? So that will certainly feed into some of the recommendations that end up coming out of this. In terms of the facilities, we found that 55% actively agreed that the facilities are well maintained. But there were three groups, and it was interesting because of the three groups who spend the most time in the schools, where more than 20% actively disagreed that the facilities are well maintained. So these were the students, instructional employees, and non-instructional employees. The people in the schools are the ones who are saying the loudest that we do need to be doing more to maintain the facilities. And we did find that 62% of respondents felt that students get the resources they need. What was interesting here, the number was even a bit higher for students. The students are the ones who most strongly feel that they are getting the resources they need. Next page is around communication. So this is the final page on the survey. Now, we have a lot of work to do in communications. As you can see, just glancing through this, all of these stats are below 50%. And as a general rule, the highest level of agreement tends to come from the leadership team, which is true, right? I work in banking. It's true for banking leaders. It's true for most leaders. The ones who are actually doing the bulk of the communicating out to a broad audience tend to be the ones who see how much work goes into that and know how much they're doing and what they're intending to do, and tend to give themselves the highest ratings. The question is, are those messages being received, and is it truly a two-way communication? And that's where that is where we're seeing a bit of a breakdown there. So this first one, 44% of respondents think that the school district communicates information in a timely manner. There was high variation here, very high variation. So that's an area where we will dig down. It is entirely likely that some of the COVID-related communications are influencing those results, and you know, hats off to everybody who's involved in those, and that is not easy. So, so that is an area that we'll dig deeper. But even in the group discussions and the one-on-one interviews, COVID aside, this came up as a major area for improvement. Timeliness, as well as this next one around making it easy to communicate with the district leadership. So excluding the leadership team, for all the other groups, more than 20% actively disagreed that it's easy to communicate with leadership. And for instructional employees, it was over 50% who actively disagreed, which is definitely statistically significant. This next one around respondents, talking about communicating with the school leadership. So going down a level from district down to school. The numbers did improve a bit, but it's still under 50%. And what was interesting here is that 50% of parents do agree that they have the that they can communicate well with the school leadership, but excuse me, but more than 20% of parents said that it was, actively disagreed. So very wide variations in, excuse me, hold on one second. Very different experiences, even within one group of constituents there. Thank you. And then this last question, the response here is really just looking at parents. So, do parents agree that the district is providing enough information on how to help with schoolwork? The parents who felt that they were getting the best information were from FGL and Buchanan Verplank. We also found that people who identified as Hispanic, Latino, Latina were also the most likely to agree that they are getting the information they need. So there's likely questions. I know we're holding them till the end, so let me flip through these next 2 pages. They talk about the interview themes. So there's 4 key themes that we'll talk about here during these one-on-one interviews. The first one is around the hopes for the, what are your hopes for the children of Hendra Hudson, and why do these things matter for you? Far and away, the number one response was around having a well-rounded, high-quality academic experience. There's different views of what that means, but that came up a lot, as well as having a sense of belonging in the community. And one thing that was interesting around that sense of belonging was parents who desire that their children have similar experiences as them. So a bit of that generational aspect going on here too. One that didn't fit neatly into those categories, but is definitely worth calling out, is around safety. So during the survey, only 52% of students said that they felt safe at school. So that is another one that we'll want to be digging into deeper and find out exactly how they're interpreting that question, what specific things we can be doing. We did get some feedback about both physical and psychological, social safety. So we'll be digging into that. Next one is around what makes our district unique, special, and successful. And really nice to see here both the community and the actual education. So on the community side, there's a wide diversity of experiences and representation. We see that multi-generational element coming up as well with that ownership and belonging. Families returning to Hendra, Hudson, generation after generation. And there's a number of different ways that people feel involved as well. On the educational side, the responses varied quite a bit. But the one that stood out to me here is around, out of the 35 who mentioned the education opportunities, 20 of them mentioned the commitment and care from the teachers. So it's much more about the individual experience in the school, that one-on-one connection with the teachers. There were some specifics about particular programs as well, of course, that stood out, but that was the one that seemed to really matter the most. All right, and then on the next slide, wrapping up the interview themes, we have an aspirational question about what we would like the district to be known for across the country as the best at what. Again, this concept of diversity came up very strongly, as well as creative thinking and just being able to problem solve, be critical thinkers. There were some very basic responses around specific areas like arts and music, sports, those types of things as well. And some basic baselines around metrics like graduation rates and dropout rates as well, low dropout rates. And then lastly, an area of opportunity over the next 5 years. So this is really getting to the heart of where should we focus. It is very clear that we are at an inflection point. And there's a wide group of over 600 constituents who we spoke with. And then again, as we follow through with these one-on-one interviews, it's very clear that we're at an inflection point, both with COVID and the closure of Indian Point. And that we have an opportunity, the community is expecting a big change. So we have an opportunity to really do something big here, whether it's relationships with local businesses, healing from the impact of COVID, improving the school facilities, making some changes on the leadership side, whether it's at the school or district level, to meet the needs of where we're going next. And very closely tied into that is the sense of community and cohesion. If the communications comes up again, as we've already spoken about, really leveraging a diversity of opinions and figuring out how to deal with the many different stakeholders we have, but really looking at the diversity within the community and being inclusive and having cohesion. There were, certainly talking about the Princeton plan, and then catering specifically from an academic perspective to that diversity in terms of student academic needs as well. The next few slides, in the interest of time, I'm really not going to spend time on these. from a race and ethnicity perspective, the main point is that the racial makeup is changing, and it is worse and has changed significantly over the last 10 years. And it's worth making sure that, across even within our steering committee, we are actively trying to more closely represent the community that we're looking to reflect. We're not there yet. I will encourage everybody to join those January 19th through 24th sessions where we dive deeper into metrics, into feedback, and help find the what's from those. The next slide is, it's interesting, even though a third of the district is Hispanic, we're certainly not finding that leads to a high increase in terms of even though we've seen a large increase up to a third of the district being Hispanic, we're seeing that's had practically no impact on the English language learner aspect. And likewise, the increase that we're seeing in terms of students with disabilities is kind of on par for the trends across the broader U.S. We are seeing increases there, and we're also seeing it in our community. So nothing particular that stands out on this level, other than to just be aware that there are these populations that we need to be mindful of. The next page, in terms of socioeconomic status, lower income, students from lower income households have expanded from about 1/8 of the population to about 1/3 over the course of 10 years. So, another thing for us to look into and be mindful of as we continue our research and pull together our answers is to make sure that we do have appropriate representation from the various socioeconomic groups, because a lot of people who are involved here have been involved for many years and may be representing kind of an old sample of what the district used to look like. All right, and then finally, the slide on the independent data exploration. These are active links that you can go to dive in really deep if you like reading what people have said, or if you like looking at the statistics. And that's the bulk of what we'll be going over in those January 19th through 24th sessions. Okay, that was a lot to cover. Millie, you're up. So Millie, we'll talk about phase 2, the foundations for our strategic plan.
Great. Thank you, Chris, for doing such a great job explaining the data to everyone. I found it really informative. I'm going to take you through the strategic plan foundation work that we've done so far. Next slide, please. So as has been said, we met as a group on December 8th in the Hen Free Library. It was in person, which was lovely, for 6 hours. So we got to really work closely together, discuss the surveys, look at the trends and the areas to focus, which is what Chris went through for us, and determine next steps. Next slide, please. Here are some pictures. You guys can probably recognize our beautiful community room in the library. It's a fun day. A very important day. We did a lot of good work got done that day. Next slide. And so Chris took you through the work. We just want to sort of call out here that if it wasn't already clear, that we looked at the responses from all of the groups. We thought that was really very important, that we looked at the responses from the teachers, from the community, from the students, and from the parents. So we looked at all of those groups. So everyone is included in this thinking and the work that we've done. Okay, next slide. The work that we were doing, we really wanted to consider it to be grounded in the Hen School District. And this is specific to us, this is specific to our district. And what about our district makes us special? What do we do? Why do we do what we do? what do we believe and where are we headed? And I'm going to read out a few of these on the next slide. And this is what the stakeholders said. And you probably will recognize some of the things that Chris said, but why do we do what we do? You know, it's for the kids. That was clearly, it's a school district, and that's why we're all here. We care about the kids and making sure the community has a great educational system. There's a desire for a strong community. Again, that was sort of mentioned. And we want to meet the needs and provide opportunities for both students and teachers. Now, where are we headed? Where do the stakeholders feel we are headed? We're headed to better understanding teachers' needs. That's something that came up for sure. Increasing transparency. We're headed to valuing voices and collaboration, increasing that. And looking at how we're teaching to ensure that all of our students are successful. And then what do we believe? We believe our teachers care about our students deeply. And I think that's something we should all really be proud of. That came across in all of the survey and research we did, as well as the discussions in the room. So that is wonderful. And I think a lot of us have experienced that. The district's expectations are high, something I'm fond of. And we believe that all students deserve to have their needs prioritized. So this is really exciting stuff. So we're on a great path. Next slide. The next bit of our work is where we develop challenge statements, and how challenge statements are structured is who needs what so that we can achieve this outcome, this desired outcome. And we worked in the session to create 7 challenge statements that I'm going to take you through. And these statements touched on the needs of students, the needs of teachers, and the needs of parents and the community. So everyone is included here. Next slide, please. Along with the challenge statements, we did an interesting exercise coming up with ideas like how might we? So how might we meet the challenge statements? How might we as a district meet these challenges? So when I discuss the challenge statements, I'll also read some of the how might we meet these challenges. Next slide, please. The first challenge statement is around student voice and choice. Students need a greater sense of agency and choice in learning experiences so that they can have more enrichment and well-rounded exposure. How are we going to do this? Well, we came up with some ideas. I'll read a few to you. How might we ensure our learning choices are meaningful and align with educational goals? How might we bring community members in to augment our class learning with real-world learning experiences? So these are some of the things we're going to be discussing as we go forward. Next slide, please. The second challenge statement is around rigorous and worthwhile course offerings. The district needs to continue to develop our course offerings to include additional real-world experiences so that we create a well-rounded approach to teaching the whole child. How might we do this? How might we ensure that high school students leave HUD with the real life skills they need to succeed in the world beyond just academics? How might we provide more functional academic offering for students of all ability levels in order to provide the best preparation for secondary, post-secondary school work and life? So things we'll think about. The third challenge statement. This one is around, next slide, please. Empowered student leaders. Students need more opportunities to participate in leadership roles so that they feel empowered and prepared for postgraduate life. How might we do this? How might we listen better to students who have leadership roles? How might we give them the authority to make meaningful changes in their school and their communities? So some interesting thoughts. Next slide, please. Parent inclusion. This is the fourth challenge statement. Parents need a greater sense of inclusion in their students' educational experiences so that they can be an active participant in their children's learning? How might we include parents more? How might we ensure working parents can participate? How can we identify meaningful opportunities to include parents in getting to know the operations and people in our schools? So those are some things we posed. And for the 5th challenge statement, next slide, please. Transparent and personalized communication. Now, you're probably recognizing a lot of these things from the data. The data and the findings is really what is driving these challenge statements, so that everything's linking together and we'll have a strong strategic plan. So the 5th challenge statement here is parents need better and more personalized communication so that they feel included, engaged, and welcome. How might we make information more easily accessible to both English and non-English speakers? How might we make people feel safe when asking difficult questions? And how might we help people feel more engaged, included, and welcome? So these are things we're thinking about. Next page, please. Investing in educators is the 6th challenge statement. All district educators and staff need to be heard, informed, and included in a collaborative decision-making process so that they feel trusted, respected, and cared about. How might we do this? How might we support increased mutual respect between administrators and educators? How might we foster a continually trusting and learning community? So these are some questions for the challenge statement. And then the final challenge statement, number 7, is around trusting relationships. The entire Hen community needs a mutually respectful and trusting relationship so that we can work collaboratively to meet the needs of all students. How might we do this? How might we ensure that every stakeholder feels appreciated and valued? How might we ensure that all socioeconomic and cultural groups feel included? How might we develop a process for ongoing feedback and consideration? So these are all things we're going to take into the next phases of our work. Next slide, please. Next slide. I'm going to take you through a little bit of the designing. As Chris mentioned, we're having town halls coming up. I hope that you found this presentation informing and enriching and interesting. You want to learn more, please join us. This is your opportunity to learn more about the planning, to get involved in discussing the surveys and the research, and to engage, and everyone's favorite, provide feedback. That was you there. Next slide's about what's coming up. So we're going to be the entire community welcome and encouraged to join the town halls. There'll be opportunities to provide feedback, likely through more research. The steering team will be leading the town halls, so perhaps Chris and I will be there. And we'll be having another all-day work session in early February. And then next slide. I think the next slide talks about the planning and advising teams are going to continue their work as well through February, January, February, and March. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much, Christine and Millie, and Dana and Ronnie for the presentation. I'm now going to give the board an opportunity to ask questions in case they need clarification. And I'm going in alphabetical order. So Lisa Anderson, you're up first.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the effort and time that you have all put into this. It's a lot, and I really appreciated your commentary, and you're diving into the data, Christine and Millie, your process, the way that you helped us understand the whole process. I was just thinking that maybe we could talk a little bit about those how might we statements and the development of additional ones, or the way that we've been working on getting more people involved with the how might we statements. I know that they were, maybe that's a question for Dana or Ronnie, but just how that's working and what opportunities people will have to add to those or to influence them.
I can take that. That's going to be the focus of the town halls next week. So come to the town halls and you'll be able to let us know with those challenge statements. Are there challenge statements that you didn't hear that you think that we should be doing some further inquiry about? And then also within those challenge statements, do you have any ideas about how might we questions to help guide our thinking? So our steering team is going to be working with those. Our planning and advising teams are going to be continuing to work with those. So we would love to hear from you too, what ideas you have or what questions, ideas you have. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. That's the only question I have right now.
Thank you. And the board was provided with the link to the how might we statement. So if you want to contribute to the brainstorming, please feel free to do that. I know I asked you guys to kind of wait until you've heard the presentation if you didn't feel comfortable doing it before then. Now that you've heard the presentation, if you want to contribute to those how might we's, please do. Jen Backer, you're up next.
Hello. I want to echo Lisa's thanks. This is so much more than I expected, so I'm really excited. I'm really glad to have part of the team here sharing your experiences with us. So just a few questions I was thinking of, and not really about the presentation, but is there anything that you feel like you need more help in from the community, whether it be our district leaders or our board or the community at large, to make this plan better or more successful?
I can start. Anyone can add. I think Christine really started to hit the nail on the head that we want our committees and our teams to be as representative of the community as possible. And so continuing to raise your hand, or if you don't represent one of those populations, but you know folks who do, reaching out to them and asking them to apply. There are different time commitments, but we want to be flexible. And we've been actually talking about maybe having like a rotating member who could come onto the steering team for one meeting if coming to all the meetings was too much, just to make sure that we're getting that representation. Chris or Millie, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Well, just building on that, the representation is a very important one for me. And I know it is for many on the steering committee. It's entirely possible that meetings just don't work well for certain people, right? I know they can be challenging, even for people with lots of time on their hands. There's other reasons, there's not many of those, but even for people with that, they can still be challenging. So, we're very much open to more ideas on how, the mechanics of actually engaging people. And some of the ideas that we came up with is sharing information through newsletters, by posting flyers in different local businesses, backpack mail going home with the students, different ways of getting information out as well as receiving information back. So, some high tech, some low tech, but I think that's an area that I think we could still use some more help on as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering, maybe if we don't have one, maybe there's like an email we could create for just strategic plan. Maybe setting up an email that we could post on our website or Facebook, so that way people who couldn't come to a town hall or couldn't come to a meeting could even just drop you a line that you guys could read at any time to at least get their input. And maybe, I agree with you, maybe putting the flyers out in local businesses so you get the community members involved that, don't necessarily have kids in the district, local pizzerias, restaurants. But yeah, I looked through the data, and it would be great to have, and I love that we got alumni involved. I think that's great. So I just look, any ideas, if you need help, let us know, but anything that we can think outside the box would be great. And
Okay.
and then just one other question is, did we reach out to any local other districts in the area to see how their development of strategic planning went? Did you get any feedback, or you didn't think it was necessary? Just wanted to get your input on that.
We work with about 10 districts in New York and then probably about 30 across the country right now. So we've been constantly in communication with those and bringing ideas in that respect. But I don't think we've connected the steering team yet with that steering team. So I think that's a great idea. Or even I have board members at other districts who do strategic planning that I could connect board members with to talk about how you could successfully support the process.
That's really all. I'm really excited. I can't wait to see your pillars and to bring them forward to our community. So thank you again for all your hard work.
All right, Alexis, you're up next. Where are you? Oh, there you are.
I'm here. Hi. Yeah, that was absolutely awesome. You guys, these types of tasks always happen to find the right community members to come forward and really take ownership. So I thank you. We really appreciate you. My first and main question was very similar to Jen's. It was really just asking, what can the community, whoever's listening to this, hopefully, what can they do to help you? But you've basically answered that question already. So there will, I guess, just be further communications as people can join on to help with, tasks as they come. Just as people have signed up already, there'll be outreach each time there's opportunity. Is that safe to assume?
Yes, anyone can join the planning advising group that we have, the 62. We would love to have it be even bigger.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do know a lot of people just from personal connections had immediately kind of stepped back after having initial interest just because, there was conflicts with schedules and stuff like that. So I know people are anxiously awaiting and hoping to get involved. So I hope you'll have more community engagement as the weeks go on. Just a question on the town
Sorry,
hall.
just before we get at that topic. So, if there are people listening who want to be engaged, what's the actual next step for them? Is there a specific email? I don't even know the answer to this.
Right.
I'm on the steering committee, but what's their next step?
There is a form that they could fill out that we can make sure makes it into the slides from today.
Okay.
And if you do know anyone who's listening, if you do know anyone who could help round out the committee, I think it goes a long way when you ask them personally, talk to them, because it can seem intimidating when the superintendent sends you a note saying, join this group. But if your neighbor says, I know when I reached out to a bunch of my neighbors and they said, oh, I didn't understand, they signed up to do interviews and things like that. So if you know people who might help us, I think it'll go a long way.
Yep. And who would we direct them to at this point in time? Someone calls me and says, hey, Alexis, I really want to be involved. What's the best person to direct them to?
You can send them to Ronnie at elements.com. RANI.
Okay, got it.
Notice I didn't choose me. I chose Ronnie.
I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it.
The only other question I had was
very responsive, I will say.
The town halls that are next week. Are those just open dialogue, or is there a certain structure? Should people, come prepared with specific questions? What's to be expected there?
Yeah, I can take that question. At the end of the slides that we were just sharing was a link to sign up for the town hall. In addition to communication, and also on the district website, the link is there.
Okay.
We prompt in the form itself, we prompt folks optionally to articulate some of the questions that they have about this process that they might want to have answered, especially after watching the live stream of the meeting today. Hopefully some things are starting to, maybe some of the dots are starting to connect for folks about what this process really even is about. But we're hoping that it will be an opportunity to get some of those questions answered in small groups. Like was mentioned, members of the steering team are going to be helping facilitate those. And so depending on the signups, it may be 5 people, it may be 30 people that we break. They're all virtual. We'll break off into small groups. And so we'll try to get some of those questions answered. And then there will be some very minimally structured time where folks can actually add to the challenge statements and the how might we statements and provide feedback and workshop those statements.
Great, thank you.
All right, Corey, you're next.
Okay, so I just have a few things here. First, I want to say thank you to everybody who's facilitating, the community members that are helping out, staff and faculty. You know, really appreciate all the time that they give towards this effort. I know it's not an easy thing. I do have a few questions, and you know, let me ask the questions first before we get the answer, because maybe you want to. Some of it has been answered somewhat, but the first is, how do we make sure that we're focusing on the future vision of the district rather than focusing on what people complain about, right? You know, making sure that it's not just a complaint session, that it is a focus on what the future vision and strategy of the district should be. The second is, which I think we've answered somewhat, is how are we making sure we're involving those without children in the district? Like, it's great that we have alumni, it's great we have faculty and community members. I think it's important, though, that there is a whole other section. You know, I think it's like 60% of our district don't have children in the district. So we have to make sure that the numbers that we're getting to represent us here include a big portion of them. So that is critical, and I'd like to understand how that's happening. The other question is, one of the things that we're trying to do is prepare our children for college and the future workforce. So I know that you're talking about engaging local businesses, but how are we engaging colleges and universities to understand what would they like to see from Hendra Hudson students that would attract more students to their university? And we should be looking at the SUNY schools, we should be looking at the Ivy Leagues, we should be looking at the technical schools. You know, what are the things that they would want to see from our district that they're not seeing now that could change the curve of how what schools kids go to from our district? So that is important. So not just colleges and universities, but also from businesses. So when you look at what high schools people went to when they become candidates graduating from university, they're going to see what high school you went to. That's going to impact how they view them. How is our district viewed, and why is it viewed that way, and what can we do to improve that view? So, you know, I'd like to see more engagement from not just this group, but from others.
Wow, that was yeah.
Yeah.
You go, Chris.
So I'll take a first step. So I heard 3. One is about dealing with complaints versus being more visionary. And that is, you know, I will say that's an area, I do this for a living, just not specifically with school districts. And I will say that even I, after doing this for a couple decades, I'm learning from the education elements team on some of the best practices, and have actually rolled them out in my place of work as well. So, you know, there's a lot of very specific ways of framing questions, or of redirecting and nudging people during a group conversation, specific ways of phrasing or responding to items that helps a lot in terms of just being more future focused. There's a certain amount where we do just need to let people complain, because that's why for some people, that's why they're participating, is to have their voices heard. And at the moment, their voices are very negative. So, you know, there's a certain amount of venting that does happen. But I will say that the education elements team has also done a great job of even the sessions that I held, they did a great job of pulling that out of the notes and setting it aside and really just focusing on more of the future vision items. So, I'm very happy to be working with them on that, and that they're teaching all of us, across these committees on how to do that as well. And I do think, as we continue doing that, it's starting to already change the whole culture around these conversations. You mentioned those without kids. That is an area that we just frankly haven't been as successful with the outreach there. And so that is, or people without kids in the school district. And certainly if they're still teachers, or if they're grandparents of kids who are involved, or if they're alumni, and they have some sort of natural connection to the schools like that, we find that we are getting some good representation there. But if they're people who don't yet have kids, or people who moved here later in life, or whatever the case is, that is still an area that we're, we have some ideas for how to do that, but, could certainly be open to more of that. And that's when I mentioned the businesses, newspapers, and, just looking at some different ways of covering that. I'll let someone else take the workforce of the future piece, or add on to either of those.
I don't want to go after you, Chris. Who was going to talk? Sorry, I just spoke over someone.
Well, I was just going to mention the piece about workforce development and the future of work is certainly an opportunity for us to work with our Boces. That is a service that they provide school districts throughout the state. They are the ones who are regularly meeting with the Chamber of Commerce and New York State Workforce Development and other agencies. And what they try to do is create programs for kids that will help address workforce needs that they have, and that's why they develop those programs. But certainly a lot of data there that we'll be able to access pretty quickly.
And what about the university question, colleges and universities?
I think that's great. I was going to speak to the way that we see our process as kind of a funnel where we start really wide and we narrow. At this point, we're kind of at a narrowed point where we have these 7 areas of inquiry. And now we're going to expand back out and diverge again. And get really wide again and start to think in these 7 areas, what are the best practices? What are people doing out there? Get more feedback from the community in these specific 7 areas where before we were really open and trying to get as wide a perspective as possible. And now we're going to go as deep as possible. So I think for the well-rounded enrichment focus area, the one around more meaningful experiences, those would be areas where 100% we should, I think that's an amazing idea, talk to the colleges and universities.
Yeah, that would be great. I think if we can engage them and really understand what their needs are and why they may or may not be selecting our students based on our programs or based on results or whatever the case is, what can we do to increase that number, that likelihood of selection. And it's not about being at the top college, it's being at the right college. Right? We want to make sure the students go to the right school for them, and are they getting all the opportunities to go to that right school? So, if we make a particular kind of student, right, that the general student that we have has a certain similar educational map, and result, does that mean that students are going to be restricted if they all want to go to the same college or university? They only take, X number from our school. Does that become a problem or a blocker for them? So those are the kinds of things that I'd really like to understand is how can the recruiting process at universities impact our strategic vision?
Great.
All right. Did we cover everything, Corey?
Yeah, all good. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks for that Great insight. Bill, you're up next.
Like my colleagues, I'd like to thank everybody participating in this, the strategic plan. This looks like a phenomenal amount of work, so thank you. And Chris, after your presentation, I want to re-go. I am a numbers guy, detail guy. I want to go back and look at the numbers again. You sparked some thoughts and want to look at that again, so thank you.
Okay.
These challenge statements, some of them are not new or unique. As someone who's been on the board for many, many, many years, some of these I've heard before, even if they don't make it into the final plan. And quite often a plan is just, okay, these are the things you need to work on. But quite often, if the person has a suggestion that this is what we should be working towards, do they have an idea of how it can be accomplished? I don't know if that's part of the plan of how this can be accomplished. And even if it doesn't make it into the plan, can we have a side list of, okay, these didn't make it into the final plan, but because as a board member hearing some of these points, I'm like, we've tried and we've tried multiple things. And if someone else has got some new ideas, I'd love to hear it. You know what I mean? You know, it shouldn't just get swept under the rug and, oh, that didn't make it into the final book. So, you know, just a thought to keep in mind, and look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
All right, Allie, you're last.
Hi, so I want to echo everyone, what the other trustees are saying. Thank you for taking the time to do this. We know that you guys are, most of you are volunteering. And this is such an opportunity for our district to re-envision how we move forward. So thank you for taking the time. My question is about the survey and the focus group questions themselves. So the results we're getting are only as good as the questions we're asking and who's responding to them. So a lot of people have asked about how we're going to get, how we're going to tap into those communities that maybe didn't respond. Were you happy with the response rate? Getting 600 responses, was that what we were expecting? How do you feel like we did as far as getting responses?
Do you want to respond, Chris? I feel like you have a perspective I can add on.
Well, I don't have enough of the data. I do know, my gut reaction is that's a great response, and also the the number that we've been able to cover for the one-on-ones where you can really dig in deep are also high. I don't actually have the raw data. Joe, you might, in terms of how large the population is versus how many we targeted versus what the response was as a percentage of that.
Yeah, we obviously we emailed the link to the survey multiple times to over, I think, 4,400 email recipients that we have. That includes parents and community members and anyone who registers an email address. So, you know, the first number, Allie, I would say, is that about 4,400 people received multiple emails from us asking them to complete the survey. That 600 also includes staff. We have probably rough ballpark 400 to 500 staff members. And total, we have about 14,000 registered voters. The reason I say registered voters is because that's a very easy round number that we use when we send mailers home. So we did send a postcard reminder home to all of those homes to ask people to please log in or please go to this website and complete a survey. So whether that is statistically significant, I'm not qualified to say that. I would have hoped for a greater response, but I don't know if the responses we received are statistically significant, but I did think we would receive more.
Yeah, so for a voluntary survey, anything above about a 5% response rate is usually considered good. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure how we did it, that we had, you know, well over a 10% response rate, but that's fantastic. comparing it to the 4,400. Compared to the 14,000 registered voters, no, we definitely don't have a great response rate. And when we looked at the categories of, how close to the schools the respondents were, there were very few who had no clear connection to the schools. So, going back, Corey, to your comment about how, about 60% of our stakeholders do not have students in the schools, and going back to this 14,000 number of registered voters, we are underrepresented on that side of things. Clearly underrepresented on that side of things.
So we're acknowledging that maybe we didn't get a great response. And when you look at
we're great.
Okay.
The response rate.
In terms of education elements, we're really happy and compared with other districts that we've done this with. It's been a pretty, I would say, typical to positive response. There were areas of focus groups that we didn't get to that we wanted to, non-instructional staff, other staff members, district staff members. So there are definitely communities that we still want to talk to and will continue to talk to. But for me, the thing that really matters the most is how much can we engage the community in the next portion. So to what Chris was saying, and a little bit to what Corey and Bill were saying, we've had the opportunity to share some of the challenges, but now it's about thinking about ways to bring the community back to brainstorm solutions. And we will have more surveys and more focus groups and more one-on-one interviews to brainstorm, if communication is a challenge, what would it look like? What should it look like? How could it be personalized for you? So I think that's the part where we would love everyone's help in getting as many voices as possible to help get towards solutions.
Good, thank you. I just want to make sure that we're tapping into our diverse community, and so I don't want to miss anyone's voice. So I'm glad to hear that we're aware that maybe it was a bit of a deficit, and that we're targeting, I guess, certain groups as we move forward in the process. My second question was about how are the survey questions and the interview questions formulated? Are those questions that you ask any district, or did they come out of some brainstorming at the steering committee? How did you decide what got asked?
Yeah, so the survey questions are standard questions that we use across our districts, but the project team was able to look at them and decide if they did or didn't want to ask those, if they wanted to add or delete any questions. And then for the focus group and one-on-one the focus group questions, those were created by brainstormed by the steering committee and then ultimately decided by the project team. So kind of like what Ronnie said, there's all sorts of different feedback loop of people coming up with ideas and then having them vetted through other teams.
Okay, thank you. Those were my only questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for all of you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate the time. That was quite a time commitment from you, and I'll be seeing you again soon. At this point, the board's going to take a short recess. It's been a long meeting already. I think everybody probably could use a short break to stretch their legs and get a drink of water and whatever they have to do. So it is 8:30 now. Do you guys want 5 minutes or 10 minutes? 5 minutes. So let's say we come back at 8:35. All right, thank you. All right, welcome back. Our next portion of the meeting will be our facilities update. It's a hard act to follow after that strategic plan update, but hopefully it will be just as exciting.
Yeah, so Anthony Merlini is joining us. He's getting his camera ready. Anthony is our Director, Superintendent of Buildings and Grounds, and he's been meeting with our facilities committee throughout the year, but especially over the last couple months in preparing this update. So he's going to walk us through some of the updates from the approved May of 2018 bond. We have a number of pictures to show people. At the end of the presentation earlier this week, we added a series of additional slides from the capital project from impacting all 5 of our schools and other facilities. So those are uploaded onto this PowerPoint that you could look at your leisure. But the committee wanted to make sure that the rest of the board and the and the public understood where we were with this 2018 bond, what is left to be accomplished, and an estimated timeline. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anthony.
Good evening, everyone. Greg, it looks like I lost the screen again. So I'm just gonna have to go from the slides, and I'll view them in front of me.
Okay,
Unless
I will advance it as you direct me.
Yeah, unless I leave and come back. So if we go to the first slide, just talks about the $18.5 million bond, which is approved in 2018. Quick overview, it shows a couple of line items that we completed. We're working on the track and field at the high school, the maintenance building, which is down behind the administration building, which has some bathrooms, and we'll have a slide of that we can talk a little bit more about that. Science classrooms at Blue Mountain Middle School, an innovation lab at the high school. It's a renovated space. Security upgrades district-wide. We did some visitor entrances, hallway doors for the high school, and the high school fence, and some other innovative security upgrades that we'd rather not discuss on open forum. The auditoriums at the middle school and high school, locker rooms at the middle school, and infrastructure upgrades district-wide, which include ventilation systems, electrical and mechanical upgrades, doors and hardware, fire code issues, FGL parking lot lighting, and the high school nurse's office. Next slide. So this shows you the high school track and field. It's completed. We were able to use it this fall. The athletes enjoyed it. A couple other things that came out of it. When we took the soil off this field, we were able to repurpose the soil. We had to go down about 2 or 3 feet. So we took that soil, moved it down to the lower FGL field. We raised that field about 2 or 3 feet. We added sod on top of it. We installed sprinkler system throughout that field. So we were able to repurpose that soil from the high school field, and we were able to improve our lower FGL field in the meantime. Next slide. So the next slide shows our maintenance building with the bathrooms, like I was discussing. So the maintenance building is going to serve our facilities department, where we'll house our plows, our lawn mowing instruments, our chainsaws, all those things that we use to do our daily maintenance on the fields and our surroundings areas of the district. One of the things that we always had wanted was to have some sort of bathroom facility for our lower sports and athletes on these lower fields. So one of the things that we did was we put in 2 bathrooms so that we can use for sports. We're able to use them this fall for the athletes. There's an awning that goes over top of it that also gives them an area of refuge in case of inclement weather or storm. They can go in underneath that if for the time being, and when the weather changes, they can come back out and they can do what they have to do, or they can be transported off to safety. We are currently using this facility. It's occupied and up and running. Next slide. Next slide shows you the Blue Mountain Middle School science classrooms and labs. They are completed and in use. We did 3 rooms altogether. We did new cabinets, new flooring, ceiling, LED lighting. We have ADA compliance now in those rooms, and new tables and chairs. Next slide. Next slide shows our high school innovation lab. This picture is actually from the design rendering. The tables and chairs are in there, but they're all pushed off to the side because we've been using this space for not actual teaching yet. The curriculum is currently being developed. So I want to give you an idea of what the space looks like when we come into full capacity. Next slide. So the next slide shows the school entrances. We added visitor entrances at 4 of the buildings. So the 3 elementaries in the middle school, will have a visitor entrance now off to the side of where we can bring visitors into the building in a safe fashion. All the doors and hardware have been installed, and we're in a troubleshooting phase. At BV and the high school, we have some technical issues and some hardware issues that we're working through, but we're confident that we'll have those resolved soon. Frank G. Lindsay, Blue Mountain Middle School, and Furnace Woods are all working. The high school, we didn't have the opportunity to put in a visitor entrance, so we're using the main entrance to come in with visitors, but we fortified the doors at the top of the stairs and changed those out, and we're going to have that as be the secure area for when visitors come in, and they'll come in two sets of doors, but just through the main entrance. So a little different than the other buildings, but the same principles. Next slide. Next slide shows the Blue Mountain Middle School auditorium. We were able to do some performances back in December, the middle school and the high school. We did a choral and we did some orchestra and band. And now we're looking to do some more performances this month with the middle school choral. Some additional considerations that we're looking to do there is improve the lighting, which for the spots in the stage, and the sound of the mics. They're currently working. It's just that we have the opportunity now, with all the other improvements that we've done there, to make some further adjustments and improvements in that space as well. Next slide. Next slide shows the high school auditorium. The original bond construction work is complete, which included seats, painting the ceiling, new flooring, and acoustics. Acoustics primarily being the most important in that space. We changed a lot of how the sound is traveling in that space. We had engineers come in, they made recommendations, and the design team put those on paper, and we carried those out, and now the acoustics are much better than they were before. Some additional work that we have in progress is we're working on upgrading the lighting and the sound. We're in the process of doing that right now. We have an outside contractor that's handling the installation of the equipment. And then our in-house team is doing the installation of the wiring. We have received all the wiring except for one cable that we need for the sound, which is coming several months away. But we're looking to have the lighting up and running hopefully over the next several weeks. We did run into a little bit of a setback with that. Since we are doing it in-house, our electrical mechanic that is doing the work, he came down with COVID, so we lost about a couple of weeks in that space. So it's slowing us down a little bit. Next slide. Some other work that we've been doing around the districts that we've completed, either with our in-house staff or outside contractors, or a combination of both. The high school, we installed a new rooftop unit that supplies heat and air conditioning to the guidance suite. That unit was past its useful life and needed to be replaced, and we've been having many issues with that over the last several years of putting good money after bad into it, and we had the opportunity to replace it, so we took it. Repointing some exterior brickwork at the high school. We had some pointing in between the bricks, mortar that was falling out. We had the opportunity to replace that, and we brought in a contractor to do that work. Blue Mountain Middle School, new kitchen, walk-in refrigerator, freezer. The refrigeration portion of that refrigeration freezer has been going bad for the last couple of years. We've been putting money into that, and we had the opportunity to replace that. So we're in the process of doing that. We're about 90% complete, and we should have that done over the next several weeks. New doors and hardware in the locker room. So at the Blue Mountain Middle School, when we did the locker rooms there, we did pretty much the internal space, but the doors, once we got completed with everything, they needed a freshening up too. So we had the opportunity to replace the doors and the hardware. So we replaced that as well. We made it a more secure space. Frank G. Lindsay, there's filler panels in the window wall system. Those filler panels are metal over top of an insulated panel. They started to rust out and rot out on the bottoms from condensation. So we had the opportunity to improve those over the summer. So we did that as well. And we have some pictures of those at the end of this presentation. Or actually next slide, please. So here you can see the Fgm window panels. The first view is on the back side of the building. And you can see that there's some rust and scaling on the bottom of those panels. And what we did was we sanded those and took care of those and stopped the rust. And then we fixed an FRP panel over the top of them. And you can see it on the picture on the right where we changed the view. It's two different views, but you get the idea of what we were trying to achieve there. Next slide, please. Some additional projects at Furnace Woods, the kitchen and bathroom, we renovated that with an outside contractor, top to bottom. New floor, new ceilings, new fixtures, everything. Buchanan Plank, we had painted some classrooms. There was a lot of work that was done in the hallway with the bond where they painted some areas and we needed to come back in and touch up some of that. So we had some touch-up work done in the hallways. And then we had the opportunity to do some classrooms. We did that work as well, painting. And then the library, we did some painting work in there and we changed the ceiling tile with micro. District-wide, we've been doing some security upgrades. We're always looking to make improvements. We have a couple of security consultants that we work with that make recommendations and we try to keep on top of those. So we've made some upgrades to our PA systems, to our cameras, etc. This is an ongoing thing that we can constantly do, and we're looking to do some more upgrades in the near future. We also installed a visitor management system. It's at all the buildings that it's live, except for the high school. We have to install a special kiosk because of the situation of how you enter that building with visitors. And once we make that, we're ready to launch that as well. And this is something that we're going to have to roll out with the superintendent and make some policy changes of how we're doing this. But we're ready to go with that. And we might see that happen over the next several weeks. And then we have some proposed future upgrades. So at Buchanan Plank, we're looking to do some renovations in the cafeteria auditorium. It's currently in the design phase. We expect submission to the State Education Department in May of 2022. And we're looking to begin construction in the summer of 2023 and be completed by September of 2023. We may do some work in that area this summer to try to get a jump. So if there's anything that we can do this summer to alleviate some of the construction next summer, that we'll try to do that to get ahead of the game. We're going to do some replacement of carpeting in select areas, primarily the hallways because it's the most trafficked area. We're looking to do that the summer of 2022 as well. High school, we're looking to replace the library computer lab rooftop unit. This unit is also towards the end of its useful life. There's been many issues with it. We keep getting to limp along, putting money into it, but we're looking to replace that the summer of 2022 as well. And then we're looking to replace some flooring in select areas also this summer. We always try to replace flooring and upgrade our areas every year. And I work with the principals and they give me several rooms and we try to do those as much as we can with the finances and the budget that we have. Next slide, please. Building conditions survey is our 5-year plan. The purpose of this 5-year plan, it gives us a target of where we want to go over the next 5 years and where our buildings need to be upgraded and where renovations need to be made. It's done by an independent evaluation. We hire an outside consultant, architect. It's a team of architects, engineers of many different disciplines, and they'll come in and look at all the different components of a building and they'll rate them to see where they are. They'll also look for code issue violations or issues with code that has changed over the last several years and where we need to be moving forward. It's also a mechanism to develop future bond projects. So our last BCS was done in 2015, and which also led to our 2018 bond. So you can kind of get an idea of how that one rolls into another. We've done visual inspections in 2020, and we're looking to do another visual inspection in 2022. And our next BCS is due in 2024. Now, we used to do them every 5 years, the 5-year plan, and we used to be on a scale of, so you would look at that and say, well, if we did one in 2015, wouldn't our next BCS be due in 2020? However, what the state had decided, since all 700 school districts were clamoring to do their BCS at one time, and it was taking up a lot of the resources, meaning the architects and engineers throughout the state, they felt that it wasn't a good process where architects and engineers could evaluate school districts on a timely fashion. So they decided to break up the schools across the state in 5 segments. And this way they could break it up where architects and engineering teams could have do different areas, and they would be able to do it more efficiently. So in the interim, what we've been doing is a visual inspection in 2020. Our next one is due in 2022. And so our next BCS is due in 2024, as I stated, and that could roll into a future bond project. The last bullet talks about we have about 30 million retiring debt in 2023, 2024. So the timing of it, we have to figure out how we want to do that. So if we want to use some of that retiring debt towards a building, towards a renovation or a bond project. Joe, do you want to add anything or?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. As Anthony mentioned, in our last building condition survey, it's an independent group that comes in, completes a state report, met with our facilities committee at the time, and then presented the BCS to the board. That building condition survey identified anywhere between $50 to $56 million of potential work that the district could engage in a number of areas to be more efficient, to be up to code, to be more technologically astute, to make sure that we have green and energy efficient systems in our school district. We ended up doing an $18.5 million project because at that time, that's what we felt the community could stomach in terms of a tax increase. So any school district, and I would say any municipal building in New York State, has plenty of work that they can do. Typically, you try to match your retiring debt with issuing new debt. So think of this $30 million of retiring debt, our payments over a very long period of time, that if we reissue that debt, we could do some capital improvements if approved by the public without increasing taxes, because those dollars or that payment structure is already baked into our finances. All right, it's sort of like you have a $400 car payment. You have a decision to make. When your car is paid off, certainly you're not making that car payment anymore. But perhaps when that car is paid off, you're going to have out-of-pocket expenses. And so what some people do is when their car payment comes off, they might go get a new car, trying to achieve the same monthly payment so that it's not in any new or additional out-of-pocket expense. So that last bullet is a very significant strategy that school districts use and employ when considering future capital projects. So we know that we have some aging systems and an infrastructure in part of our buildings that is in dire need of repair. I don't want to harp on it, but the high school was not able to open on time because of the hurricane rains that came through a few days before we opened after Labor Day. Really did a number on some of our archaic HVAC systems in the high school that are very, very old and very, very antiquated. So the building condition survey includes all sorts of potential improvements. Ultimately, that would need to be approved by the public in order for us to go forward. So that certainly is a consideration that the board can contemplate over the next few months, because I believe the facilities committee certainly is interested in dreaming a little, as we just talked about our strategic plan, dreaming a little in terms of improving our facilities in a in a very financially conscious way. And just real quick, we added, as I mentioned at the onset, we added additional slides at the end of the presentation that you guys can look through on your own, but we added some additional slides of the improvements in various aspects of the school, so you can see the additional commitment that our community has made to improving our facilities that we're very, very thankful for.
Yeah, taking it to the fact that, a lot of people can't come into our buildings and see a lot of what we've been doing and seeing the improvement that we made where we've had the opportunity. So Joe would ask me to take some pictures or to use some pictures from, other individuals of, some of the areas that we improved. So that's the little snippets that are at the end. If you want me to walk you through them, I can, or we can just, start with questions or whatever you want to do, Joe.
Why don't we start with questions? And I know we have 3 of our board trustees here who are on the facilities committee. So first I'm going to ask, do you guys have anything to add before I ask the other trustees if they have questions? I assume you guys don't have questions, but maybe you do. Bill?
Maybe just ask Anthony if, or Joe to elaborate on the high school auditorium, when we think we'll be able to use that for performances. I know you said it's being held up. I believe wiring issues. So what is it looking like? Are we going to be able to use it this year or not? And what is our game plan for that? Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit. I know we talked about it in the committee, but I know some of the community would be interested in that also.
Yeah. Joe, you or I? Me?
Yeah, why don't you start?
Okay, all right. So where we are in the process of we've had a little bit of a time trying to get the cabling. The cabling is a special cabling for the audio and the lighting components that we need to install. We found a couple of vendors, suppliers that have the cabling, and we were able to work out delivery dates with most of that cabling. So all the cabling except for one cable has been received. So I just received it as of this last week. So my electrician, I'm going to work with him over the next couple of days to get in there and put all the cabling in for the lighting and as much as we can do for the sound. The last cable is for the sound, and it connects the main control panel to the back of the stage. It's a pretty important cable when you talk about the sound. But we're shooting to have still have our performance in the spring. We're shooting to do, if we need to, bring an outside vendor in to do the sound system. But we would use our lighting, and we would be able to be up with the production. So that's our goal. So my goal was the end of this month to have all the lighting cabling in, so the vendor could start installing his lighting and do what he needs to do over the next couple of weeks. I just have now been pushed out though, because the gentleman that was supposed to be installing the wiring was out with COVID. So it pushed me off a little bit, but we're still on that target date, and that's still what we're driving for, to have everything up and ready so we can have that performance.
Great, thank you.
I was wondering, did you have any, okay. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about the timeline for the BCS, and if there's a way of, with that retiring debt in 23 and the BCS not happening until 24, it seems like we need a little bit more lead time between the BCS and the retiring debt so that we can really plan for that, retiring debt. And is it possible to somehow get that BCS done earlier, or how can that possibly work if we want to really take advantage of the retiring debt?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things is Joe is, and he can talk a little bit more about it, is strategized. Is there a way that we can do the BCS early? Is there a mechanism that we can do that? So we can reach out to the state education department, tell them that where we are, why we want to do it, and plead our case. There's no restriction that says we can't do it. We just won't be able to submit the BCS to the state. So we can have a team come in and do our own audit of our facilities, just like you would do, other bonds. The BCS gives you a better mechanism of doing it because then it's documented. It's a piece of something that goes up to the state. They have a copy of it, etc. So it's just a better mechanism of doing it, but there's nothing that prohibits us from having our own team come in, evaluate everything based on what our needs are and what we want to do. So I don't know, Joe wants to add to that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the reason for the board and the public that we need the building condition survey is the potential work that is outlined in that document is the check and balance between what we ask voters to approve. So if we want to receive state aid, which is an incentive to do a bond and have long-term borrowing at low interest, you need to connect your project back to your voter approval, all the way back to your BCS. Otherwise, you're not eligible for state aid. We can do any construction project we want, and we can ask for the public to approve it, and that can happen, and we would not be eligible for state aid, which means our public would need to pay 100% of the project. So the BCS is critical. That is the gateway. That's the check and balance to going through the rest of the process. The key is that exactly what Anthony said. Could we petition the state to say, look, our last BCS was 2015-16. We're not projected for 8 years. Here are some issues we've had or some concerns, as well as an opportunity to align potentially a project in future borrowing with retiring debt. They may grant us an exception, but I think we need to start with the state to see what the process is to do that. I know that sometimes the cost of a BCS is aidable, meaning the state will reimburse the district. It's usually an expense in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $120,000. It's that involved. The state could say, look, you can do a BCS whenever you want, but the state will not reimburse you because you are not in the queue for your BCS until 24. And that might be a decision we make to pay the full freight of the BCS in order to line it up with retiring debt and not miss that opportunity. But those are certainly questions we'll raise to the facilities department at the state.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Jen, did you have anything to add before I ask the other trustees?
No, I mean, I think we just thought it was important to share some of the successes of projects that we did complete, and Lisa and the questions that we spoke about as far as the next step.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting to see some of these projects being completed. It's disappointing, I think, to everybody that the auditorium's been held up. COVID and supply chains and availability of workforce has really done a number on those things. So who do we have left? Alexis, did you have any questions?
No, I didn't. Anthony, thank you for taking us through that and also sharing all the pictures. I know that in normal times, we've all been able to see the improvements that you guys make, but we haven't been in the buildings in so long, the public. I had a question, and you might have said it and I missed it, but was there a similar setback with the auditorium in the middle school, or no? Did I make that up? I felt like there was something that wasn't finished there.
There have been a couple little setbacks for one reason or the other. We were waiting on components for, minor things, trying to get resolved, and then trying to get individuals back into the building. So the lighting that's in these spaces, a lot of these spaces, is controlled by computer or goes through, has to have programming done to it. They're very sophisticated LED fixtures. So we had to get somebody in to come in and program them. They weren't working the way they should be. They would go on, but they wouldn't dim the way they should, or they wouldn't operate 100%. So we had some issues getting some people back. So it did delay us a little bit. And we needed to just push that home, and we had to push the contractor at the end to really take care of that. So yeah, we were a little delayed.
Okay, cool. That's it for me.
All right, thank you. And Corey?
So Anthony,
Mhm.
you've done a great job with this. I mean, it was a huge undertaking, ton of different projects going on at the same time. Like really, really happy with the way things turned out. And thank you for the time you took to give me the tour. You know, I know we didn't get to the last school there, but you know, I've seen everything. I actually did attend an event at the Blue Mountain Auditorium, and I was there with my wife, and she was so impressed with how the auditorium has changed. I mean, the place is completely transformed. So really fantastic job. Looking forward to the additional sound and lighting. I'm glad that's moving forward. I would like to ask though, for the future, I know we've talked about this before, but new HVAC for the schools, right? You know, it'd be great to get some sort of air conditioning in all the schools for the kids because it gets ridiculously hot. And obviously with COVID and ventilation, I know that there are challenges with that. I know it's super expensive. I know logistically it's next to impossible in some spots. But, you know, the fact that, you know, you're continuing to look at that, I'm hoping that that's still on the plan because I think it would make education so much easier for everybody, faculty and students and staff. Comfort is important. And, you know, you always see teachers posting about how they're sweltering in 100-degree classrooms and, you know, or it's freezing outside and they have to open the windows because of COVID. So, you know, obviously if we can get better HVAC for the future, it will be better. And for BV, did you ever find out what's under the cafeteria? Like, do we know that yet? Or are we going to be in for a big surprise when we start that project and open it up and find out there's bedrock there that we can't move without dynamite?
Yeah, so that does pose a little bit of an issue. So we haven't had the opportunity to do it yet, only because of the timing and trying to get someone in to do it. And now school's open, et cetera. So we're looking to do it during one of the breaks between now and the end of this school year to try to get an idea of what's underneath there. My fear is like, you know, even if we take core samples and we bore down, that we could miss where the rock is, if there is any rock or if there's any ledge or if there's any, you know, situations underneath there. So that always is, you know, something of an unknown and, you know, a prospect that we have to deal with. But yeah. In terms of HVAC with the EPC, I did task the contractor consultant that's going to be doing the EPC with looking at, you know, ventilation and cooling throughout the district. You know, where we can take that opportunity, we are going to try to mitigate, you know, one way or the other. So the cafeteria, at BV, one of the things that is on the table, since we're doing a full renovation of that, is adding some sort of cooling feature to that cafeteria. So we are looking at those aspects. Blue Mountain Middle School with the EPC, we're looking at working on the airflow in that building as well. And like you said, you know, I'm still driving to the hole to try to figure out, you know, an easy way or a good way of putting in some sort of cooling aspect to that auditorium as well at the middle school, because I know that interior space does get crazy hot.
It's terrible. Yeah. When it's bad, it's really bad. One last question. So from a solar perspective, I know we have solar in all the schools right now. One of the things that I know was being talked about, there is some land on some of our property that might not be used as much. Is it possible to convert any unused land or less used land to possible solar farms or even to wind energy to generate more electricity? Because I don't think we don't generate 100% of our electricity, right? I think it's like a lower percentage.
It's about 40%.
Right, 40%. So we can increase some property, you know, use some property or increase the footprint of the solar panels. Could we get that up to like 60 or 70% or even higher? Especially if we're going to talk about new HVAC, it would be great to increase that over time.
Sure. We did ask the EPC consultant if there was something that we could do further with solar. The problem with solar is this, for certain aspects of it, the state if it's not a big enough return on it, that they don't really back that too much. So while there are opportunities, there's not a large opportunity with the EPC. With that being said, there are other individuals that are promoting solar, whether it be through NYSERDA, which is an energy group that we deal with through our electricity, or through other side consultants that are out there that are promoting or trying to get more individuals to go towards solar. So there are those opportunities, and we do continue to pursue them. We are going to have them look at the maintenance building, because that's a new building. Is there an opportunity to put solar on that building, to harness some of that? So we are, we'll continue to do that. Yeah.
Great. All right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Anthony, for that update, and to the Facilities Committee for organizing this. It was great to see. So that brings us to our Superintendent's Report. Those of you who watch these Board of Education meetings often realize that we kind of flip things around so that the presenters for other things could get their stuff done first. So we are up to our Superintendent's Report now.
Yes, I'd like to talk about some updates regarding COVID protocols and expectations of school districts, and how we are handling those that test positive for COVID, both staff and students, as well as those that are considered a close contact. On January 10th, so on Monday, we received clarification to guidance that was published on January 4th, which was published in response to guidance on December 28th and all the way back to Christmas Eve on December 24th. So over the last 3.5 weeks, we have heard very regularly from the State Department of Health. Where we have ended up is with Monday's memo. And for all of you who we have an email address for, we sent an email to parents earlier this afternoon outlining what these changes are and what to expect. These are changes directly from the New York State Department of Health. So I'm not going to bore everyone by reading an email, but if you didn't receive that email, it's also on our website as a news item, verbatim. So please make sure you check out our website. In short, New York State Department of Health is making it a little quicker and easier for staff and students to return to school and return to work if they are a contact of a positive or if they test positive. This is not a school district decision, it's Department of Health. They are the ones who guide our decisions, and we are legally required to implement them. So over the last number of days, we have been reaching out to different staff and students who now qualify for an earlier return to school and work based on this guidance. It's been met with great applause by our families, most notably, or in particular, because many of our students and staff who tested positive or who might be a contact of a positive were not exhibiting any symptoms. And that's perhaps the biggest change in the guidance, is that if you are asymptomatic, you are able to return to school much quicker than in the past. And that's based on some data or some analysis that the Department of Health has done, and certainly has been a recommendation of the CDC for the last number of weeks. So we will continue to implement that guidance, as well as distribute COVID tests. On December 28th, the governor signaled that she would provide school districts with COVID tests. And lo and behold, this school district has been provided with COVID tests. And so we are now going through the process, working with our school nurses in how we provide COVID testing to families for their children. We want to begin with children and staff that are symptomatic. Those folks who are in school that are demonstrating COVID symptoms. Now, it's very likely that you could demonstrate COVID symptoms and not have COVID. And that's great, and that's perfect. But we now have testing to, with some certainty, to rule out COVID. And we want to use those tests and provide them to families for them to administer to their children to rule out COVID. It doesn't mean that sick children that are not COVID or don't have COVID shouldn't come to school. we want to make sure that sick children stay home, whether we're in a pandemic or not. But the COVID testing will certainly help answer that question that oftentimes lingers. And as many of you know, it's very difficult these days to find a COVID test, to find a site, to sign up. And that is one of the reasons why we have had so many staff and students out, because they are taking extra precautions to try to be tested. So we're going to be able to speed that process up with the COVID test we received from the state. So symptomatic staff and students will be provided a COVID test. We also identified a little over 200 families that signed consent over the last number of weeks to participate in COVID testing. We are going to provide them with a COVID test for them to use at their discretion. And then we'll decide how to deal with the rest of our tests. We want to make sure that families feel comfortable sending their children to school. We want to make sure that families feel comfortable that other children do not have the virus or the potential to spread it. So we're going to work with our nurses and our school physician, determine the best way to distribute those tests so that everyone has a little more peace of mind in an environment where it's very hard to come by in terms of COVID testing. So we will be communicating with those families directly and specifically in terms of those that have children that are symptomatic, as well as those families that signed the consent form for testing. And then probably over the next number of weeks, we'll roll out an opportunity for families to receive a COVID test based on the supply that we have and in conjunction with any anticipated new tests that we should receive from the state. So it's exciting news. It's a lot of news. If you've been following all things CDC and Department of Health, it's been a whirlwind since December 24th, but we think we've landed at an actionable spot, and we are taking action like every other district to try to return children and staff to school safely, so long as they are not ill and exhibiting symptoms. So we'll continue to provide updates as they're available, but we're in a good spot, and hopefully this is a signal that perhaps that wave, that holiday wave, is behind us, and we can again focus on trying to focus in the last few months of winter, and as we get to the spring, a return to normalcy. It's been a long time, and I know we're eager, but we still have to work through the rest of this pandemic. So any COVID questions, I'll certainly try to answer them.
If anybody has any COVID questions, raise your hand or press the hands up button. Okay, that was complicated, but it's written down. And if you have any questions, contact your administrator at your school. If you don't know if you should come, if you shouldn't come, and if your student does test positive, please let the school know, although contact tracing is becoming less.
And I just want to wrap up this conversation by extending our great appreciation to our nurses and our secretaries and everyone in all of the schools who is responsible for contact tracing and communicating with parents and receiving test results and helping families point them in the right direction. It has been a Herculean effort, and for some reason, we did not experience the uptick in COVID that many other districts did in late November and December. I can tell you that those staff members, those nurses and secretaries worked tirelessly throughout the vacation, throughout evenings and weekends, working with parents and trying to make them feel better about a really stressful situation. So thank you to that group who has really stepped up and exhibited some outstanding bedside manner at a time when we're really, really stressed and really, really concerned about the pandemic and what the next steps are. So without them, we would not have been as successful in our communication efforts and in our mitigation strategies. So again, hopefully we're nearing the end, but those fine staff members have done a tremendous job in keeping our schools open and keeping parents astute in terms of next steps and how they can help their children and help us. And with that, any other questions? But I know we have a meeting next week, so the rest of our team will have some updates then.
Yeah, that sounds good. This has been a very long meeting already, and if there isn't anything super urgent. We do have a meeting next Wednesday again, so we'll leave it for that meeting if that's okay. All right, so that brings us to our audience comment section on agenda items. Carmen, did anybody write in with audience comments this evening?
There were none tonight, Carol.
Okay, thank you. So that will bring us to our committee reports. Does anybody have a committee report? I know Facilities Committee did their report tonight, so Finance Committee's report has been delayed till next week because of the volume of material we had to cover this evening. So we'll be discussing that next week. And anybody have anything else? Okay, so that brings us to our board comments and new business. And I know Lisa has something.
I do. Just to let everybody know that next week we're going to need to vote on the New York State School Board Association Area 10 Director. We had nominated a person, Cheryl Brady, to be on the list of potential candidates. She indeed is one of the candidates now. There are also two others, Frank Harrington and the other person's name has slipped my mind. And anyway, we'll be actually electing someone next week, and our district gets one vote, and this is someone who represents us in all of the districts within our region, within the area 10 of NISBA. So it's an important election, and I sent you all some information about the different candidates that I hope you'll take a minute to review and to look at to help educate yourselves on the candidates that are running.
Thank you, Lisa. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right, Carmen, did we have any audience comments on non-agenda items this evening?
We did not tonight, Carol.
Okay, thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of our meeting. Can I get a motion to close the meeting, please?
Moved.
And seconded by Lisa. All in favor? Aye. So we will have a meeting next Wednesday, the 19th. We're hoping to be back in person, but this is a fluid situation, so please keep track of the notifications. And if you are so inclined, please do attend one of the strategic plan town forums that are coming up. Town halls, excuse me. The dates for those are both on the slide presentation, and they're on the website as well, right, Joe? Okay. All right. Have a good night.